I'm Greg Ryder, the president of the Circumnavigators Foundation and a foundation scholar myself. I was the first foundation scholar in 1971. And with me today is Brian Evans, the foundation scholar from a few years later. And Brian is also the coordinator emeritus of the Circumnavigators Club Foundation and a co-chairman together with me of our retrospective project. We're very, very pleased today to have with us Dean Peter Krogh, the Dean Emeritus of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, where this whole program began. Dean Krogh himself was a newcomer to the School of Foreign Service in 1970, and less than a year later, he was approached by Ray Dinsmore and Charlie Blaisdell from the Circumnavigators Club, and they put their heads together and formed the fellowship that became the grant program that we've now had for 50 years. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dean Krogh and ask him a few questions on his reminiscences about the program and the importance of it to him and to the School of Foreign Service. Over to you, Dean Krogh.
Well, I'm not sure who came forward first, whether it was the school or whether it was the Circumnavigators Club Foundation. But in any event, it was a blind date. I hadn't met Ray Dinsmore and Charlie Blaisdell, and they hadn't met me and my co-conspirator on this, Pete Vakey, who was a diplomat in residence at the school at the time. But the blind date worked out. I think it became apparent to both parties at the outset that the school and the Circumnavigators Club were kind of a perfect match. And what has unfolded has really been a perfect marriage. Now celebrating its golden wedding anniversary. Yeah, so on my side, I was a new dean, as you know, Greg, you were there, and I had to turn the school around because it was on a downward slope. I had to get it back on its feet. I had to generate some esprit, some excitement at the school, and greater identity for the school. And the Circumnavigators Club Fellowship was the partial answer to that. It was in many ways one of the sparks that ignited a resurgence of the school. So for me, it was really a terrific development that brightened the prospects for the school, offered the students a really remarkable opportunity. So there we are.
Well, that's sort of accords with my recollection of the whole events. A notice was posted on the bulletin board that this grant was available, and people, my fellow juniors and I, thought we died and gone to heaven. And I know a lot of people.
There you go. There you go. You know, excitement was generated, and identity and opportunity for school students. It was really, really just perfect. And of course, our best students came forward, Greg, to grasp the opportunity to be the first to be granted a fellowship.
Well, what you really followed, you were the dean during the first 25 years of our existence, and the fellowship program, which was always at Georgetown each year, and then we broadened out to include other schools, but we always considered Georgetown to be our mother school, and because of your deep involvement. And would you mind just sort of walking us through how you were involved with the program once it got launched? I know David Raymond, one of your assistant deans, was kind of your offsider when I was going through the process and after I got back. But you as a dean in the dean's office, did you continue to take a keen interest in the program once it was launched?
Well, certainly I took an interest in it, but my time was largely occupied by shaking other trees, raising money for the school and developing new programs. But students aspiring for this fellowship would come to me from time to time and pass their ideas for a world tour by me, get my thoughts on whether this would hit the mark. So I would follow it in that way. But my involvement with the program really became more intense after I retired as dean. And I was teaching a course, a mega course entitled The World's Westward March, Explorers, Warriors, and Statesmen. And this was really a breeding ground for candidates for the fellowship. And looking over the list of fellows, I see they really clustered for me around the years that I was teaching this course. And I have stayed in touch with these graduates of the program over the years. Gregory Lucas, Clinton Brown, and Matthew Ryline, 3 in a row, were all students from my course on Explorers, Warriors, and Statesmen. So this was a very happy connection to come back around to the Circumnavigators Fellowship as I had graduated from being a dean to being a full-time professor.
Well, that's wonderful. Brian has a few questions he'd like to ask you, sort of more specific things, if you wouldn't mind. So let him shoot.
Yes, thank you, Greg. Dean Krogh, first, I just want to give you a footnote on what you just said. The scholars that you mentioned were candidates when I was the chair of the committee from the Circumnavigators Club Foundation that selected the Georgetown grantees. And we did not know that they were in your seminar. So it was the quality of the students and the quality of the teaching that came to the top rather than any long-standing connection between you and the foundation that got them their grants. So that's a real feather in your cap.
Well,
I'd like to ask you a question. If you had been, say, one of Greg's peers in 1971, and the dean had just posted this in the bulletin board and said, "Hey, here's an opportunity," would you have competed? What would you have wanted to study? Where would you have gone?
Well, to tell you the truth, Brian, at that point in time, I would have welcomed an opportunity to get the hell out of the dean's office.
I think he means if you had been an undergraduate.
I see. Well, of course, what was happening at that time, what I was at grips with at the school, and what the students were at grips with too, was really student protests, which grew out of opposition to the Vietnam War. So an interesting proposition would have been to inventory student protests on a global basis, to find out what was motivating it, how substantial it was, and what the goals of it were. I can remember at this time attending a Bilderberg meeting in Europe. Bilderberg was an ingathering of the leadership of the Atlantic community. And one of the agenda items was student protest and its impact, not just on the universities, but on society at large. So this is something that would have interested me. But I must tell you, as an undergraduate, I was at Harvard. And I never had an opportunity to go abroad. I couldn't afford to go abroad. It was not there for me. My first trip abroad was maybe 3 or 4 years after I graduated from Harvard. It's the first time I went abroad. So for students to be able to go out and see the world at what I would consider to be a rather early age is really a gift.
Thank you. you were talking about students going out at an early age to do this trip, which is sort of one of our goals, is to hit that sweet spot in their academic career where they know enough to feel confident, but they also know enough to know that they don't know everything and they want to go out into the world and explore. At the time that the foundation and the School of Foreign Service started this grant, we were still working, and we're still working today, on women's rights and equality, and equality of opportunity for both sexes. Initially, the grant did not have females allowed to participate. It wasn't until 1973 that Joanne Munisteri has sneaked in by putting her application as J. Munisteri and showed up, and she won a grant. Were you aware of that sort of that challenge to the original precepts of the grant at that time? Did you have a hidden hand behind that?
I don't know that I had a hidden hand behind it, though. In the mid-70s, I established a program at the school called Women in Foreign Service in order to encourage more women to enroll in the school and aspire to foreign service careers, and appointed Madeleine Albright to run that program. And it turned out to be very successful. I do recall that there was a safety concern about launching women on a global trip. Not just a concern on our part, but a concern on the parental side on this. But this, it appears, was rather rapidly overcome. And as I look at the list of past recipients, it looks to me like equality has been achieved. Yes. Almost equal numbers of men and women, which is the way it ought to be. The problem for the guys is that the women are oftentimes more competitive. They've got better academic records. They're further along in their intellectual development and physical development as far as that goes. So I could say that I'm glad to see that the guys are keeping up.
Well, thank you for that. And a question, you mentioned about how you tried to get the best students like Greg to apply that first year. So what impact would you say that these students had when they came back for their senior year, when they came back to Georgetown and they entered back into campus life?
Well, I have trouble reaching back to calibrate that, but they became leaders really when they came back, because they had this very privileged experience that fellow students were anxious to hear a lot about. So they had a kind of natural platform in their senior year to exercise some leadership in the school community, and to raise the sights and the horizons of the students enrolled. So I think there was that impact by example that they returned to the university community with.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over.
They certainly, several of these graduates have stayed in touch with me very fruitfully over the years. I have, in many ways, been the beneficiary. Hank Shea, one of the graduates in the 70s, I think, when I retired as dean, arranged to give me this chair that I'm sitting in. Which has a plaque on the back of it with the dates of my deanship, quarter century of the School of Foreign Service. Greg Lucas stays in really great touch with me. He's doing very interesting work in New Orleans. in the music field. Tad Brown goes under Clinton Brown on the list, but he goes by Tad, has been in touch with me closely as he's pursued his Foreign Service career. And Matt Ryline is a star out in Chicago in the financial field. He ought to be in a position to make some generous contributions to the Circumnavigators Club Foundation, but he has stayed in great touch with me. So, yeah, it's been very rewarding for me to continue to be in touch with some of the alumni.
Thank you. Greg?
I wanted to ask one question before we sort of wrap up, because I know we're time constrained with you. Do you believe that the Circumnavigators Foundation around the World Travel Study Fellowship, Dean Krogh, stood out among the fellowship offerings at the school, or how would you rank it? I know there were a lot of country-specific awards. There were the Fulbrights and the Rhodes and those sort of things that had a very country or region, Western Europe or Latin America focus, but we had this global focus. And what do you recall as that being sort of the ranking in the firmament of the grants and fellowship offerings at the school at that time?
Well, yours is a fellowship, if I recall properly, that kicks in the summer between the junior and senior year. The other fellowships that you're referring to are postgraduate fellowships, the Fulbright, the Rhodes, the Marshalls, and those. So this has a very distinctive location within the educational program of the school. And in that respect, I think not only the global nature of it, but the location within the curriculum is really quite unique. So I'm confident that going forward, it will continue to have real drawing power. It's just located in the sweet spot of an undergraduate education that looks forward to a world of engagement in the world. So I think, as I say, it was a blind date, but it was a great one and continues to be.
Well, we're very gratified to hear that, Dean Krogh. What advice would you give us going into the next half century of this program? Brian and I certainly won't be around to see most of it, but we may be around to see more than we'd like. But would you give any advice as how we might change, modify, improve the program? What we might be looking for? It's pretty much stayed static, the focus and the way we go about choosing students and where we choose them and how we choose them. But I'd be interested to hear your learned opinion about that.
Well, it seems to me the program has been a great success. I don't know every one of the participants, of course, but those that I know are very high quality. And I expect have gone on to impressive professional lives. But I think one thing that might be interesting, if you haven't already done it, would to take the occasion of the 50th anniversary of this program and publish a directory of the recipients of the Circumnavigators Club Fellowship with brief bios. What have they done since they graduated? There's a program at the school called the Krogh Scholars, which is the honors program that's been named after me. And I'm meeting this Friday with the director of the undergraduate program to organize a directory of the Krogh Scholars, because it will help in the institutionalization of it and also facilitate the creation of a mutually supportive network of individuals who have had a common experience. So that is a thought that you might want to consider.
Well, as a matter of fact, as part of the retrospective that we're working on now, we are going to produce a directory, and we'll certainly shoot you an electronic copy and a physical copy if you'd like once it's produced. As with all of these things, I don't know how many Krogh Scholars there have been so far, but we've had 140 in our program wide, not just including Georgetown, over the last 50 years. It's very difficult to get people to reply to requests for updates in their information. We had a lot more reply for the 40th anniversary directory 10 years ago than we have now. So we're working hard on it. We'd like it to be as comprehensive as possible. And I agree with you. It can be a tremendous tool to sort of institutionalize and broaden the appeal of these things. So thanks for the suggestion.
I think there have been over 200 Krogh Scholar graduates. They're usually about, this got started about 20 years ago now, or really 25. So there may be more like 300 because there are around 15 a year who are Krogh Scholars. But we fortunately can rely pretty accurately on the alumni records of the school in order to reach these people. But it will be an effort for us as well. We're going to have to put some money into it.
Good luck with it. Must be a labor of love for you.
Well, it's one thing I can continue to do for the school. Say, I would like to make mention of a book I've just written because it seems to be a book that would fit comfortably with a circumnavigator. This is a book on the world's westward march, explorers, warriors, and statesmen, that grew out of the course I taught, from which Lucas and Ryline and Tad Brown graduated. And it's an actual circumnavigation of the globe over 600 years, beginning in China in the 15th century, moving westward across Eurasia as centers of initiative developed, moving west to the Atlantic rim of Europe, onward to the New World, all the way to the Pacific rim, and then back to China in the 21st century. So it is a circumnavigation, and perhaps it was partly inspired by your fellowship. It certainly fits nicely with it.
That's wonderful. We're delighted to hear that. In your work, and we get a hold and purchase an autographed copy, or purchase a copy and get you to autograph a sheet to go in it. I'd like to be the first.
I'd be glad to do that. It's up on Amazon, fortunately, with a full house of 5-star reviews. It was just published a year ago last June.
Is there any chance we can get you to do a little talk at one of our luncheons, or the Circumnavigators Club's annual meeting, which is usually held in New York, and you can promote your book and bring some and sell them there, and we'd love to hear about it.
Well, maybe I could do that. You can stay in touch with me about that.
Okay.
Great. I still have my membership in the Harvard Club, so I can stay there for overnight for less than $200. So maybe I'll go to New York.
Well, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, I just want to. I think it's a great idea what you're doing. This further institutionalizes what is really. Ray Dinsmore and Charlie Blaisdell would be so delighted. The originators of this wonderful program. So just congratulations on doing this, and confident best wishes for the ongoing success of this fellowship program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being there at the founding and helping to found it. And thanks for your kind words, and all the best to you with your book and all your other endeavors.